Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the hour. We'll bring you as much as possible closer to the latest in the protests in Los Angeles as National Guards take over following President Trump's order. Speaking of the U.S. president, his travel ban and visa restrictions begin for the 19 countries on the list. Plus, climate change activist Greta Thunberg and other activists on board a Gaza-bound ship claim that she has been kidnapped. Thanks for joining us again on the program today, and we're trying to get you as close as possible to developments from Los Angeles and California, where protests have been going on for nearly 4 days now over the presence of immigration and customs enforcement officers in the city. The state's Governor Gavin Newsom has confirmed he will be suing President Donald Trump for deploying the National Guard to his state to quell the protests. In a post on X just a while ago, Newsom says this is exactly what Donald Trump wanted. He flamed the fires and illegally acted to federalize the National Guard. The order he signed doesn't apply to California. It will allow him to go to any state and do the same thing. We're suing him. Newsom had also said today the deployment was an unconstitutional act, and in his words, we're going to test their theory with a lawsuit. President Donald Trump ordered the deployment of the National Guard to Los Angeles to curb unrest over immigration raids. It comes days after ICE recorded 100,000 arrests since Trump's return to the White House. The National Guard troops were seen stationed along Alameda Street in Los Angeles on Sunday ahead of protests expected to take place later in the day near City Hall. The U.S. president is deploying 2,000 California National Guard troops to Los Angeles over the objections of Governor Gavin Newsom after a second day of clashes between hundreds of protesters and federal immigration authorities in riot gear. Chaos erupted at a protest against the U.S. immigration and customs enforcement in Paramount, south of downtown Los Angeles on Saturday, as vehicles were set ablaze and rioters took to the streets. Protests began on Friday outside the Los Angeles Federal Building and escalated into violent confrontations following ICE operations that led to 118 arrests, including 44 on Friday alone. By Saturday afternoon, the number of protesters had dropped from 400 to just dozens, according to local authorities, though tensions remain high. Federal agents had unleashed tear gas, flashbang explosives, and pepper balls, and protesters hurled rocks and cement at border patrols. Smoke wafted from small piles of burning refuse in the streets. The National Guard is a reserve force for the U.S. military, usually working at the state level. Members have civilian jobs or go to college while training part-time with the military. Normally, the National Guard is called in by a state governor, but U.S. President Donald Trump has used a provision that lets him take control himself. So these are scenes from Sunday. Reports saying the protests in Los Angeles do appear to have quieted down now have quieted down overnight after a third day of unrest. But let's just back up a bit into the protests on Sunday, the third day. Riot police deployed less lethal rounds ammunition other than bullets and tear gas to disperse the crowds, while protesters hurled projectiles at the officers. At the height of the confrontation, one protester was seen struck by a round. Demonstrators, some of them waving Mexican flags and carrying placards, read, "No one is free until we are all free." They all chanted slogans and confronted the police units stationed under bridges and along major highways. The California state flag was also seen among the crowd. In one dramatic exchange, sheriff's deputies were filmed firing crowd-control munitions as protesters shouted, "You're making it worse." Elsewhere, firefighters were called in to extinguish a burning vehicle, while a flaming trolley was seen blocking a key road.
They can't leave anybody on that side. Cross the street.
While staying with the protest, police vehicles were also set ablaze and vandalized by those protesters on Sunday. The cars were engulfed by smoke and fire, while protesters hurled explosive devices at the police. Meanwhile, law enforcement forces advanced on horsebacks eventually, deploying tear gas to disperse the crowds. President Donald Trump has deployed up to 2,000 National Guard soldiers to Los Angeles to manage the unrest. The ICE has also increased its operations following the announcement of a mass crackdown on illegal migrants under the second Trump administration. And as for the U.S. President Donald Trump, he says the situation in Los Angeles demanded law and order, referring, of course, to the anti-ICE protests that turned violent over the weekend. The president also warned that officials who stand in the way of ICE's deportation efforts will face federal charges.
Be watching it very closely, and when they spit at people, you know, they spit. That's their new thing. They spit, and worse, you know what they throw at them, right? And when that happens, I have a little statement. They say, they spit, we hit. And I told them, nobody's going to spit on our police officers. Nobody's going to spit on our military, which they do as a common thing. They get up to them this far away, and then they start spitting in their face. That happens, they get hit very hard. What I think it is, I mean, if we see danger to our country and to our citizens, we'll be very, very strong in terms of law and order. It's about law and order. Well, we're going to have troops everywhere. We're not going to let this happen to our country. We're not going to let our country be torn apart like it was under Biden and his auto pen. Stand in the way of law and order, yeah, they will face charges.
U.S. President Donald Trump, our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, is monitoring the situation in Los Angeles. Maria, at what point did these protests become violent and then, the protesters turned on the anti-riot police?
Well, it happened over the weekend. As you mentioned, these ICE raids that kind of went into the downtown area of Los Angeles. And as we know, the ICE raids are not necessarily a friendly event. These are events that do create contentious and controversy. And so these protests were started. And as soon as the National Guard was brought in, it did create a level of elevation and escalation. We know the U.S. is known for protests. We've seen the U.S. began protests that end up going throughout the world. And so this was supposedly a peaceful protest. Now, did individuals comply with all the requests of the police? Likely not, even if they were asked to move or to end the protest. These protesters are outraged. We know that this has been a major concern for Americans, these ICE raids that have been occurring, and the level in which Los Angeles is experiencing them and what they experienced on Friday led to them wanting to protest. But we have started to see protests, just to be very honest, across the United States. Even in Washington, you can drive down the street and you'll see a group of 5, 6, 7 people protesting, especially as a result of what many have experienced with the loss of jobs with the cuts in the federal government. So the protest is nothing new. This obviously hit home for many in Los Angeles. And once those National Guard came on the scene, as you can see, the tanks that actually come when the National Guard come, the types of weaponry that comes is oftentimes an intimidating experience for those protesters and does lead to unfortunate escalation.
Yes, and immigration, as you rightly pointed out, is a touchy subject for people in California. And that's because the state does, I think, because of its proximity to the Mexican border, you have a lot of people crossing the border into California. But then let's talk about this rift between Governor Gavin Newsom and President Donald Trump. Gavin Newsom is upset about the deployment of National Guards. He thinks this is Trump's plan all along. So what does it mean when National Guard is deployed to anywhere in the United States? Is it similar to a state of emergency?
Yes, it's not always considered a state of emergency. A lot of times, National Guard are brought in when there is a state of emergency. But again, a state of emergency is normally clarified and classified by a governor. And so the governor then states it's a state of emergency and requests for additional federal support. In this case, we see the federal government has initiated the National Guard being present. And so that's, as you mentioned, is the rift area that has been created. I don't know. We have not received reports that Governor Newsom and President Trump had conversations prior to the National Guard. It appears as if, from what we've seen from both sides, that this was something that the president and his administration moved forward on. This was nothing that was collaborated through the state. And typically, the state will ask for additional federal support if they feel as if the protest or some event is of the level that is beyond the control of the local or state police. And in this case, the state and local police had not been fully utilized and were not in a space where they felt they needed additional support. So typically that's when the National Guard is brought in for additional support for the state.
But the concern here, of course, is the brutality with which, by which they carry out, their activities. And Governor Newsom earlier today posted on X saying that he was accusing the U.S. president of flaming the fires and illegally acting to federalize the National Guard. Is that also the concern of people on the ground? Because I noticed, watching the protests, they did seem to get a bit more violent after the deployment of those National Guards.
Yes, I mean, there is a high level of anxiety and tension that is transpiring as a result of the ICE raids. And so to your point, when we know these ICE raids have occurred, we see kind of the detrimental impacts to families, unfortunately, that are occurring. Some of the level of force oftentimes that people are experiencing during these raids already has the protesters at heightened alert and a bit uneasy, and obviously at a point of almost rage. And so we've seen that. And then when you bring these types of troops on the ground, we know this is not necessarily a state executed activity. This is something that's by the federal government. It just reiterates and kind of further points out to those individuals, especially those who have recently migrated to the United States, whether they're here legally or illegally. They oftentimes have family members that have experienced these ICE raids. And so they are outraged when they see this type of force. And I think that's the concern, is that people are concerned around the force that is being put forward. We've seen the mayor of Los Angeles speak out, who's a former congressional member. And so this is, I think, where the concern lies, is the level of force that is being impacted and inflicted. And oftentimes we've seen that individuals who have experienced these raids oftentimes are not the ones that have been intentionally targeted or could be here legally.
Yes, and the fact that people can do nothing about the brutality that follows after. Maria, just wanted to find out if ICE officials will continue their functions despite the protests in Los Angeles.
It's highly likely they will. Now, will they be conducting their ICE raids in this protest area? Probably not, due to the fact of the National Guard being present, some of the activities that are currently occurring just to keep down the protest. And obviously streets are blocked and things of that nature. And these ICE raids oftentimes take quite a bit of strategic planning. They often require individuals to kind of know exactly where someone is. So it's a lot more to those ICE raids than just going into a building and and taking people and detaining people. And these raids are, and these protests right now are happening right outside the detention center. But as far as ICE raids as a whole across the country, will likely continue and move forward. The president has been very clear on that and very clear on his stance as it relates to making sure that the country is not impacted by those who are here illegally.
And I know that the governor has been trying to interfere, with these raids. How does he hope to keep up, with this opposition against the president's wishes and still remain within the ambits of the law? Because what he's doing is actually going against President Donald Trump, and I'm not sure exactly how that will end.
Well, the courts are very busy these days. ICE raids are probably one of the largest number of cases they see each and every day. And so it's highly likely that the governor and his team are working right now to see the power of the state at this time. And then in addition to that, there could potentially be even lawsuits that are brought forth by the state of California as it relates to these ICE raids and the inflicted force and the bringing on of the National Guard to address the protests. So those are typically what you see the next steps of a state in these type of circumstances. So it's probably we're about 9:30 in the morning or a little bit before 9:30 in the morning in California. And so their day is just beginning. And so we'll probably see more coming out later on this afternoon.
Just before you go, Maria, could you explain what happens, when people are picked up during these raids, where they're taken to, what happens to, their lives and their businesses in the United States after that?
Well, typically individuals are taken to detention facilities, typically in the local area or that state somewhere near by that state. We know there's one not too far from where many of these raids occur in Los Angeles, a detention facility. They then will process the individual, either taking them to be deported by plane to wherever their country of origin is, or oftentimes even potentially if there's been some sort of a crime, they could be processed in U.S. courts. And so it really depends on the circumstances of the individual and for their next steps after their detainment.
Thanks again for joining us, Maria. We're off on a short break now on The World Today. Still ahead. The US and China hold trade talks in central London. We'll have details shortly. Stay with us. Welcome back to The World Today. A new round of talks aimed at resolving the trade war between the US and China have started in central London. A senior US delegation, including Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, has met with Chinese representatives such as Vice Premier He Lifang at Lancaster House to resolve tensions between the world's two largest economies, which is threatening global growth. Chinese exports of rare earths, which are crucial for modern technology, as well as Beijing's access to US products, including computer chips, are expected to be high on the agenda. Just last month, Washington and Beijing agreed a temporary truce over trade tariffs, but each country has since accused the other of breaching the deal. The new round of negotiations follow a phone call between Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping last week, which the US president described as a very good talk. A call first for the two leaders since the trade war erupted in February, and according to President Trump, resulted in a very positive conclusion for both countries. I want to bring in now geopolitical analyst Edward Opper. He's in Texas. Edward, thank you for joining us on the program today.
Well, thank you for having me.
These talks have been long coming. It would be the start of the resolution to trade tensions between the U.S. and China. And a lot has gone into this, hasn't it? How confident are you about the progress that could be made today?
I'm very confident. Because the two superpowers, they want to resolve this. There's no need, for the back and forth to push back and push forward. They are doing. The world needs a trade stability that makes sense for both the importer and the exporter. I think what we have seen is, China taking an advantage on the former administrations, and now we're calling them out, and they've recognized, the strength of America. China wouldn't be where China is today if not for America. We all know 30, 40 years ago, China was a sea country, and it's still a sea country, regardless of the noise, they make on the trade on the world stage. But that is neither here nor there. What we want to do is let's see something that makes sense, and so I'm confident the talk is going to lead to a resolution that both sides can deal with.
Both sides did agree a temporary truce last month, but even that did not hold. Perhaps you think that they both want to still maintain their positions, not really ready to give in to any demands, but wanting to resolve the trade war?
But it's hard for you to get on a negotiating table and still not give up something. I mean, in the economics 101, for anybody who ever took that subject, that's what they call opportunity cost. So what are you willing to give up in order to get something? It can never be win-win. It can never be, my side or, or to hell with you kind of attitude. So you got to come in and throw in something, and also have, the commitment to follow through with the negotiation. So that's what it is. Look, I applaud Trump. Not that everything he's done or said is along the line of what I'm cheering for. But when it comes to trade, every country has to protect its own industry, and every country has to call out any exporter that is going to take advantage of their own industries. If you don't do that, you become a dumping ground. Again, if you study the economics, there's a term called dumping ground. Nobody wants to be that. You want to buy and sell, and those selling to you also has to be willing to buy from you. It can't just be one-way traffic. This world is an interrelated economy, and so anybody coming in to flex or say, hey, you got to do it my way, obviously they don't understand what trade is. It's a two-way traffic, and you got to yield, you got to accommodate, and then you got to tolerate, but not to at your own expense. Nobody should suffer at the expense of another country, regardless whether you are developed or an emerging economy.
Right, and let's talk about the U.S. Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, who is leading these talks in China, in London, with his Chinese counterparts. He's been criticized before of not having a grasp of issues, even domestic economic issues, regarding commerce in the United States. Do you think that he's better positioned to stand in for the U.S. in these talks? You think that he would do a good job of it, even though it does appear he's acting as a puppet for the administration?
The word puppets doesn't go to describe his role. I think he's the Commerce Secretary. When it comes to trade, that's what they call the U.S. Trade Representative. They're the ones that work directly in the office of the president. But the Commerce Secretary is a cabinet level position, so he's the one in the position to go in and start this talk. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to the president of U.S. and then the Chinese president to come and sign off on something. So it's one of those things we do. You send out your deputies or envoys or diplomats to start this talk, and then at the end, the two heads of state will come and then agree to it. So the idea that is a puppet for the administration. When you are at a cabinet level, you serve at the pleasure of the president. So that's what that role is. So anybody describing him as a puppet obviously just want to stretch that word, but it doesn't resonate with me.
Why do you think that London was chosen as a location for these talks?
Well, sometimes you got to do what they call the neutral ground. So it's not doing it in Washington, it's not doing it in China. You find, both parties are going to have to choose a location that, okay, let's go over here and start to talk. So I don't know why London was choosing, London to me is an old glory, but they always want to assert their presence, which is fine. So it could have been in Geneva, it could have been in Dubai, it could have been in Lagos, it could have been anywhere. But if they chose London, it is that's an effort. I'm very much interested in outcome, and the outcome that suits both parties in a dispute so that they all can go away win-win and don't feel like, I've been taken advantage of.
Well, I'm sure that there are American and Chinese businesses looking forward to the outcome. Global shares are mixed as we speak as they await details of the talks. I know you have stocks in the stock market, so are you looking forward to whatever impact this may have on the markets today and tomorrow?
Of course, every one of us is invested in some kind of way. If you don't invest directly in a company, you invest in a mutual fund or you invest in some other funds that are being spread into companies. So yes, we want to see that happen. I am not one who sits every day and watch what the stock market does. When I invest, it is something that I know is not going to affect my ability to pay my basic need, my food, clothing, and shelter. So I'm going to allow that money to do the up and down. What matters is the timing when I want to withdraw my investment out of the stock market. Then am I doing it at the peak? Am I doing it at the valley? So, most people get threatened and irritated or frightened because the stock market is doing this. It's never, a stable thing, but it's something when you invest, you put it away. It is one of those things, the rainfall in the desert, you have your bucket out. Is it going to come? When it comes, is it going to hit your bucket? So yes, our businesses are concerned, but we are not all frightening. Look, America is a resilient country. I haven't lived anywhere else, but I have traveled extensively, and I was in China in January. I'm telling you, Amarachi, if you can pay me to live in China, in fact, they can't even pay me to live in Canada or Mexico or UK. I chose America by choice, and this is my home. It is my adopted home, and I believe in it, and I see it. I'm not saying everything it does is right, but at least it's better than the best of some other countries. So let us just watch this. But I've always said to people, honor your own country. You can be global, but you still have to have a zip code. You still have to have a home country. And until you stand up for your home country, nobody will stand up for you. It's a very competitive world. So, for instance, I see when I was in Nigeria, who cares about China? To be honest with you, when I was in Nigeria, who didn't care? We talked about Taiwan, but not China. But look at how they have managed to put their better foot forward, and everybody's now clamoring. So what it shows is that if you devote your time and your resources, and you are sincerely committed, not just a commitment of convenience, sincerely committed, you can do for your country what people think it cannot be done. But the leadership has to be right. The leadership doesn't have to be deceptive. It can be where you're running around your excellencies, why nothing is excellent about what you do. Lower that tempo, become the common servant to make sure that people that look up to you believe you are making the effort, not where you are, ceremonial and glamorous. You dress when you go to work, you look like you're going to a party. But anyway, that's not here or there, but I think countries have the right. And there's nothing on the international laws or regulations that say countries don't have to be as rich as they want to be. But for you to be as rich as you want to be, you have to make the effort. You have to make the investment. And then you also have to be protective. But you don't have to be protective to where you stifle your potential partners. And your potential partners don't have to come over there and run circles around you. I mean, just look at what is going on in Nigeria. You have Lebanese, Chinese, people from sea countries who have nothing. They have not gone to school better than Nigerians coming over there and running circles around Nigerians. While Nigerians are committed to just doctor, professor, engineer, excellency, majesty, Igwe, da. At the end of the day, what has that gotten for Nigeria? Let's be honest. So that's my position.
Well, interestingly, I know that even people in China do feel very patriotic to their country. Thankfully, I've had the opportunity of living there for a few months, so I can tell you Chinese are also very proud of their country. Well, we appreciate your thoughts and your analysis on the program today, Edward. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
Well, today is June 9th, a start date for U.S. President Donald Trump's travel ban and visa restrictions on 19 countries. A travel ban on 12, visa restriction on 7. President Trump announced the new policy last week, fully banning citizens of Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, the Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen, but imposed heightened restrictions on people from Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela who are outside the U.S. and do not hold a valid visa. The Trump administration claims the prohibitions are necessary to improve national security by targeting countries that have ties to terrorism, lack of sufficient vetting for passports, and have high rates of citizens who overstay their U.S. visas. While African countries have been the most vocal in their rejection of the ban and the restriction, even the African Union has described the move as discriminatory and called on the United States to adopt a more respectful and consultative approach. Well, Trump's travel ban has got African countries affected and worried over their relations with the United States. But some analysts say it's simply a fulfillment of Trump's promise to voters. Legal practitioner Anthony Ogunfebo and public affairs analyst PoliticsToday said they were not surprised by the move. They were speaking on Diplomatic Channel this week.
Well, can I just say right from the outset, that straight off the bat, that with the Trump presidency, it now appears that the key point to bear in mind is to expect the unexpected. Because first of all, we have the tariff issues with the rest of the world. And now we have this visa ban, which has been placed on 12 countries, 7 of which are African countries. And you see, the starting point, what I would say there is, of course, it's every country always seeks to act in its best interest and to protect its best interest. But at the same time, I think there are ways of going about it that will not lead to any rancor or consternation or issues with other countries. And the appearance that is being given here by the visa ban is that it's rife with so many inconsistencies and also lacks clarity. And as a result of that, lots of other countries, particularly the African countries that you mentioned, Chad, Sudan, and countries on the ban list, are basically up in arms because they believe that there's this sentiment that they're being unfairly treated and bullied by superpower. And many experts have also said that that's the general feeling among the nationals or among the citizens of these countries that have been placed on the ban list. And the second point I will make in that regard, on that issue, is that there's also this impression that I get, and I've also read on social media, that the relationships and bridges that have been built over the years by the US with other countries, other trading partners, and so on and so forth, that these bridges are at the risk of being burned, and that damage could very well take years to repair. And again, that's the general sentiment that is being shared by so many experts around the world. Thank you very much.
I'm not surprised. In fact, people who have been watching Trump years before he got into his incursion into politics will realize, if you go back to videos that as far back as 20 years, 25 years, some of the things that Trump is doing are things that have been in the public space for a very, very long time. So from that perspective, he has been very, very consistent. If you look at what the geopolitics that's going on around Europe, the issue with NATO and with NATO, the North African, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, are things that he has talked about. Issue of trying to get NATO to pay their fair share in terms of contribution, NATO countries, in terms of contribution to the NATO cost. These are things he's talked about. So at the level of immigration, there is really nothing new about what he's doing. If we remember in 2017, he also came up with this travel ban that also received much criticism from a lot of people. How effective the travel bans have been is a different ballgame, because people are saying that it's not exactly achieving what they are intended to achieve. And the reality is that Trump is a disruptor. Whether in terms of American politics or in terms of geopolitics also. So he's been pretty consistent in what he's been trying to do. And obviously, a lot of countries, I agree that, yes, a lot of bridges have been burnt. But again, it also shows the power of the United States, the reach and the influence of the United States. Because during the tariff battles, for instance, I think the Chinese government wanted to mobilize a lot of other countries against against the United States, for the common front. But they were not exactly able to build that coalition that was needed. And you saw a lot of countries adhering to Trump's advice for them not to retaliate, and then it will be easier for them, the tariff regime will be easier for them and the rest. And then they now began to talk even with the Chinese government too on the issue of the tariffs. So this situation, like I said, is not exactly new. Of course, there are two categories of this: those with a total ban, and then those that have restrictions. And like he said, until some of these countries are able to get their acts right. I don't know for exactly what rights acts is talking about. Some of these countries are violent prone, we know. But if you look deep down again, there are people that will tell you that some of the strife that is going on in parts of the world, that back in history, back in time, that the United States also had a hand in some of these things. So it's a bit of a contradiction, really. So different countries, different scenarios. But I think perhaps the Somali scenario might be better. Somali says that it's going to work closely with the United States to see how they can smoothen the gap or the problems that brought about this ban on Somalians traveling to the United States. So ultimately, I think some of these countries also have to look inwards to see exactly what needs to be done.
You can watch the full interview with Anthony Ogunfebo and Achike on Diplomatic Channel. It airs tonight at 8:30 on Sky 515 in the UK and 11:30 on DSTV. We're off on another break on The World Today. Still ahead. Well, he's known as the human magnet, an Iranian man setting the world record for sticking spoons on his bare skin. And they're actually sticking. Look it up. Welcome back. The Israeli Foreign Ministry has released video footage showing activists from the Freedom Flotilla Coalition on board an aid vessel intercepted while en route to Gaza on Sunday. The Israeli military intercepted a Gaza-bound aid ship carrying Swedish activist Greta Thunberg and other activists on Sunday. Israel's Foreign Ministry did release the footage showing personnel distributing food and water to crew members of the vessel operated by the Freedom Flotilla Coalition, and stated that all passengers were safe and unharmed. The FFC condemned the interception as an unlawful boarding and claimed Israeli forces confiscated life-saving cargo, including baby formula, food, and medical supplies. Excuse me. Meanwhile, activists on board the flotilla began making videos about their ordeal. Climate activist Greta Thunberg is one of them. In her video, she claimed she'd been kidnapped.
My name is Greta Thunberg and I am from Sweden. If you see this video, we have been intercepted and kidnapped in international waters by the Israeli occupational forces or forces that support Israel. I urge all my friends, family and comrades to put pressure on the Swedish government to release me and the others as soon as possible.
Well, Kenya's police chief has suspended an officer in charge of a local police station, along with all officers who were on duty after a young man died in their custody. Mr. Albert Ojwang was arrested for a post on X in the western town of Homa Bay and then driven 350 kilometers to the capital, Nairobi. Police said he had published false information. A statement by the police chief says the suspect sustained head injuries after allegedly hitting his head against a cell wall while in custody. He was later rushed to hospital where he was pronounced dead on arrival, adding that his arrest had been prompted by complaint by Deputy Police Chief Eliud Lagat about his name being tarnished. The director of rights group Amnesty International Kenya branch, Irungu Houghton, says the death of the young man, said to have been a teacher and a blogger, raises serious questions. He calls for an urgent, thorough and independent investigation. The head of the Independent Police Oversight Commission, Ahmed Hassan, assures that his team will do everything to ensure justice is served for the family and for all Kenyans. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has reiterated the urgent need for fundamental economic transformation in the country, highlighting that inclusive growth and empowerment must go hand in hand. He was speaking at a Black Business Council event. The president underscored the council's critical role in addressing the country's historical injustices and economic disparities. He called for a united national front to ensure the citizens, especially youth and Black communities, are equipped with tools, opportunities, and support needed to fully participate in and benefit from the country's economy.
One would say that we are in a transformative era in our country, because transformation is not simply about just reform. It's about rethinking systems to ensure that, yes, there is dignity, there is equity, there is also sustainability and resilience for the future generations that will follow us. And it is to this end that we adopted the theme that we did for our G20, that it should be about fostering equality and fostering sustainability and ensuring that, yes, there is full transformation. Now, the current polycrisis that the world is facing, which manifests in the way that it is, as I articulated, demands systemic change rather than incremental adjustments.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa. Back in the U.S., the dispute between President Donald Trump and his former Doge director, Elon Musk, was triggered by months of intense stress on both sides in the public battle between the U.S. president and the billionaire donor. That's according to Musk's father, Elon Musk. Trump and Musk began exchanging insults last week on social media, with Tesla opening new tabs and SpaceX CEO describing the president's sweeping tax and spending bill as a disgusting abomination. His words here. Asked whether he thought his son had made a mistake by engaging in a public clash with the president, Elon Musk said people were sometimes unable to think as clearly as they should in the heat of the moment.
Completely amazed. I don't know why I haven't been here before. I think the image that people give to us in the West of Russia is completely wrong. Russia is wonderful. It's absolutely amazing. And it's quite clear to me that Moscow is the premier city, capital city in the world. Far greater than any other city, and I know them all. Elon is standing on principles. He wants to cut the budget into a situation that they save money instead of waste or spend more money than they have. And he was told that his role would be just that. But when he was presented with a budget that in no way represented savings, he stood by his principles and said, I'm not prepared to support this. This is wrong. And so therefore I stand by my son. On the other hand, in politics, there is give and take. So you can't always get everything perfect because you have to deal with all sorts of people, all sorts of problems. So the answer is, in politics, to try and explain to someone new to politics, it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. You know, that's how you go. And I'm pretty sure that soon things will be back to normal in America. Elon is not a political, he's a tech person. He likes to work with people who are all, you know, the very best of the group and the smartest people and so forth, so that he can get things done as best, you know, as quickly as possible and as best as possible. In the world of politics, unfortunately, you have to deal with all the people. So you have to, as a leader, I was told this by the Prime Minister of our country many years ago, you have to deal with people who are disabled, you have to deal with people who are not that smart, you have to deal with people who are pretty dumb, and you have to deal with people who are very smart. So they all belong. There's no one who doesn't belong. And in politics, if you get into the world of politics, you have to understand that. You have to lead everybody, not just the A group. And in that respect, Elon would have a certain amount to learn, you know.
Iran's magnet man Abul Fawz Mokhtari has secured his place in the Guinness World Records history on 3 separate occasions. That's all thanks to his extraordinary ability to make objects stick to his body. We're looking at this video of one of those instances. In Iran's Karaj city, Mokhtari effortlessly attaching dozens of spoons to his face, to his torso, along with other objects. Remarkably, he even made a spoon stick to another man's face. Mokhtari explains that his ability emerged during childhood. According to him, everything sticks to my body, anything that you can imagine, rocks, wood, glass, plastic, anything at all, even a drop of water or a fish, a chicken, anything. I attract these things, he says. A certain excitement, he says, arose in me that I possess such an ability. I realized this ability is inherent in me. Like a generator, I can turn on and off. There he is trying to stick glass to his skin, and it is sticking indeed. Well, he says, my ability increases significantly when my body is not covered. I have to take my clothes off to stick objects to myself. And finally, Portuguese football fans erupted in euphoria after their national team defeated arch-rival Spain in a dramatic penalty shootout to claim their second UEFA Nations League trophy in Munich on Sunday. Supporters from both nations arrived at the Allianz Arena before kickoff, building anticipation for the high-stakes final. After the match, the elated Portuguese fans celebrated wildly, chanting the name of their captain and national icon, Cristiano Ronaldo, and waving their nation's flags. Supporters compared their GOAT, that's the greatest of all time, to Spanish prodigy Lamine Yamal, claiming that the 17-year-old needs a big milestone to get to where Cristiano is now. Portugal and Spain delivered a thrilling performance for those who watched. For the fans in the Nations League final, with both sides holding off each other to the penalty shootout as they drew 2-2 after extra time. The Seleção showcased their steel mentality by converting all 5 shots, while Diogo Costa managed to save the 4th penalty by Spain's Alvaro Morata to hand Portugal a 5-3 victory and win the title.
Yeah, like I wanted to say, Cristiano Ronaldo is one of...
Let's hope they were all celebrating as safely as they could. Thanks for watching The World Today. I am Amarachi Ubani.